growers and exporters, but also, I have to say, to the officials who get the hard work done. And look, our growers, we know, can compete with the best in the world, and that's why we're making sure they can actually reach the world. So now, with all of the work that Trade Minister Todd McClay has been doing and all of the hard workers behind him, we've got over 70% of New Zealand's trade is now covered by a formal trade arrangement. And of course, MFAT and MPI again need to be acknowledged. They've managed to iron out over $730 million in trade barriers. Again, real results being delivered to New Zealand business. Mr. Speaker, one of the most consistent frustrations I hear from growers, and indeed, I'm sure members across the House will be hearing from businesses across New Zealand, is the detrimental impact that the RMA has had on them for the past 3 decades. Mr. Speaker, I think that 900-page behemoth had become completely unwieldy, completely unworkable, and was really, really hamstringing both this economy, but actually, it needs to be acknowledged, was hamstringing the environment, was preventing the improvement of the environment and environmental outcomes. Consents were taking years. We've all heard the horror stories. Compliance costs, and unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I can hear some barracking from across the chamber, and the unfortunate thing is that previous government spent quite some time developing a new RMA, which actually turned out to be worse than the first one. So we've taken it back to the drawing board and actually done a real job with it. So we're very excited about that. And already with the engagement through the submissions process, we're very much looking forward to the select committee process, so we really can start to, as Chris Bishop would say, panel beat the thing and make sure we deliver something that's workable and that's enduring and has better economic outcomes and better environmental outcomes. The Prime Minister's been very clear that this government has listened and it has acted. That is our duty to do as legislators in this House. So, of course, we passed the first reading of that ledge late last year. We're now working on it so that we can get it progressed into law before the third quarter of this year. So it is going to deliver a new planning system that is faster, it's more consistent, it gives people some surety, because that surety is what drives investment, which is what drives business growth and therefore job growth. It never ceases to amaze me how very difficult that party finds that simple concept to understand. But look, Mr. Speaker, I can see my time is running out. I had so much more I wanted to talk about, but suffice to say, we're here, we're committed, we're doing the job because we see the benefits to New Zealand and New Zealanders, and we want to ensure that flows on to every facet of our society.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Phil Twyford.
Thank you. There are few things that make New Zealanders more grumpy than when they cannot get the medical treatment and the health care that they need when they need it and where they need it. And of course, on the doorsteps of West Auckland, when I go out on a Saturday morning and talk to my constituents, the very first issue that almost always they raise is cost of living. And they are deeply, deeply unhappy with this national-led coalition because at every turn, food, electricity, housing, rates, insurance, almost every item in the household budget has become more expensive under national, even though they promised to fix it. Everything from the car rego to prescriptions is more expensive under national. But close behind the cost of living is the running down and the deterioration, the underfunding and understaffing of our public health system. And I thought the House might like to know about the story of Troy Stewart, a cardiology nurse who recently told The Post that he was so disillusioned with his work as a cardiology nurse at Waitakere Hospital in West Auckland that he has upped sticks and gone to Australia to work, unbelievably leaving his family here in New Zealand and sending money back to support them. He told The Post that at one point on the cardiac ward where he worked, he had to leave an elderly cardiac patient who'd been ringing the bell for more than 10 minutes while he dealt with another patient on the ward that was acutely ill. And Troy said that this was almost a daily occurrence on his ward. Now, Madam Speaker, official documents show that in the last 18 months, more than 70% of the shifts at Waitakere Hospital, my local hospital in West Auckland, were below the agreed safe staffing levels. 70% of the shifts. Now, why is that? It's because Christopher Luxon will not let the hospitals employ the nurses that they need. At the same time, half of our nursing grads are without jobs. There is a crippling shortage of nurses in our hospitals, but half the nursing grads cannot find a job. There's something absolutely mad about that situation. And the people that I represent in West Auckland, they desperately want that to change. I want to also tell the House about an email that I received this week from a local resident, Vijay Farley Naika, who actually wrote to the Health Minister, and he was kind enough to copy me on his email, saying that the reports and lived experience from patients, whānau, frontline staff in our community point to overcrowding, extended waiting times, workforce shortages and uncertainty in clinical decision making, particularly in emergency and acute services. He talked about the fact that his father was misdiagnosed at Waitakere Hospital after prolonged waiting times and a lack of continuity and urgency in his care. His father had other problems at Waitakere Hospital, and Vijay Farley Naika observes that these experiences point to systemic issues rather than individual failings. Staff appear overstretched, decision-making is compromised by workload pressures, and families are left feeling anxious, excluded, and unsure whether their loved ones are receiving the care they need. Madam Speaker, 650,000 people, according to the New Zealand Health Survey, cannot get the care they need. But luckily, Labor has a plan. We will provide a Medicard for every New Zealander that provides 3 free doctors' visits. We will invest in the health system. Labor will make sure that people get the care that they need locally. New Zealand cannot afford 3 more years of national.
Excuse me. I call Ingrid Leary.
Madam Speaker, I would really suggest that members of the government get out into their electorates a little bit more, because listening to their speeches today, they are in an alternative reality. They love to quote facts and figures and statistics and targets and trickle-down economics, when the reality for people on the ground is so very different. I haven't heard any of them talk about the price of cheese, which has gone up 30%, around $13, $14 in most supermarkets. I haven't heard them talk about the price of eggs, up 20%. The price of milk, 2 litres now close to $6. I remember when you could go down to the dairy, Madam Speaker, and get 2 bottles for around $6. They are in an alternative reality that has been made very clear in the State of the Nation report by the Salvation Army this morning, which highlighted the worsening child poverty, the worsening unemployment. In fact, unemployment is now at record highs, the worst statistics in a decade, and some sections of the community really feeling the impact, including our Pacifica youth, 1 in 4 unemployed. Horrendous statistics. The trickle-down economics that they love to speak about do not work, and that is what the evidence is telling us, and that is what our constituents are telling us. Rising family violence, Madam Speaker. This is a really worrying trend that the Salvation Army is reporting. It correlates with the increased mental distress, and we know that the mental health system is yet another part of the health system that has been neglected by this government. So what does the government do in response? Well, today, Nicola Willis so desperate as a Minister of Finance, decides that she's going to try a political tactic and get an inquiry into the Reserve Bank around its monetary policy that happened under COVID. That independent institution, the Reserve Bank, because she is so desperate that she wants to talk about lessons learned, she wants to talk about governance, she wants to talk about transparency, because she cannot stand the fact that things are sliding under her watch, that the cost of living that is crippling New Zealand families, that so many people are struggling with, is happening right now under her watch. This is a classic distraction. It is a classic smokescreen. It is a classic manoeuvre to direct the anger that is so rightfully being directed to her by people on the street, and we hear this all the time when we do our issues boards at the local AMPs. When I was down at the Invercargill Southland Institute of Technology Open Day the other day, hearing the anger at this government, hearing people say they want to change this government because they are concerned with what's happening right now, not what happened in COVID. But what is happening right now, Madam Speaker, is that we are seeing these record unemployment figures. We are seeing housing, people struggling with housing, people sleeping in cars. I have been dealing with a constituent case this week, heartbreaking, of a mother of children sleeping in cars. I have been dealing with Housing New Zealand, I've been dealing with Oranga Tamariki. They simply do not have the people and the services available to support our struggling families. And when we look at that and then look at the cynical timing of the report that the Finance Minister has commissioned, surprisingly, today, and guess what? It's going to land in September, several weeks before the election, so that she can do what she does day after day in this House and try to point the finger at everybody else for her fiscal mismanagement. We heard today in question time how she can't even read the books properly. That is why she is creating new financial indicators. It is a sad state of affairs, and it is easier, Madam Speaker, to try to count LSAT losses rather than talk about job losses, and those job losses are happening right here, right now, under this government's watch. So what is her plan? Her plan is simply the blame game. It is desperation from the other side. We don't see any credible plan, and I would invite people at home watching this debate to listen to the theory, the trickle-down economics, the stats, the words like engagement with the sector. They should be out on the ground, boots on the ground, talking to their constituents and at least acknowledging the hardship that is out there currently. It might be easier to swallow the words that they are saying if there was some acknowledgement of what is going on for ordinary New Zealanders. But sadly, they are so out of touch that they cannot even do that. And that is why we will be changing this government come November.
I call Carl Bates.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I had intended on coming in and speaking about a few of the things that are going on in the wonderful Whanganui electorate. But, Madam Speaker, I cannot sit here and listen to the garbage, Madam Speaker, coming from the other side of the House. On Monday, I had the privilege, Madam Speaker, of visiting Whanganui Hospital. Because like a good local MP, like many of my colleagues on this side of the House, I'm regularly engaged and seen in my actual electorate, Madam Speaker. And I went to the maternity ward, not generally somewhere I frequent often, Madam Speaker, but we have recently had a baby. And they invited me into the maternity ward to see what was going on in Whanganui. Now, the maternity ward in Whanganui, Madam Speaker, is 100% staffed. Madam Speaker, it's also 100% staffed by midwives. Madam Speaker, they were very happy. We had a great chat. We talked about positive things going on in the healthcare sector, things that Labor don't know about because they don't get out and actually talk to real New Zealanders. They don't understand that their legacy, their $100 billion of debt they created for this country actually costs New Zealanders every day, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member had the tenacity to talk about eggs. Now, I'm not talking about eggs in the maternity ward, Madam Speaker. I'm now talking about eggs in supermarkets. Madam Speaker, they go up because, surprisingly enough, their inability to solve the RMA and to fix the RMA and to actually remove the cost of paperwork in farming, in primary industries, in horticulture has a cost. Madam Speaker, at the supermarket till. My local egg manufacturer, one of the egg production facilities in the Wanganui electorate, they have been struggling to actually put up a whole new barn because the RMA, even though they've been there for 60 years, even though they've been having chickens in this place and producing eggs for years, have been unable to put up the next barn because of the RMA. And I tell you what, Madam Speaker, they are looking forward to the changes that this government is bringing through the House this year to be able to do things that directly impact the price of food in New Zealand. Madam Speaker, let's talk about energy security. Another area where the Labour Party want to scaremonger, because quite frankly, Madam Speaker, that's all they're good at, is scaremongering, is trying to convince New Zealanders that it would be worse than if they were in power, Madam Speaker. But New Zealanders, they don't have short memories. They remember what that government left this country with. They remember that that government was the government that banned oil and gas exploration. So, Madam Speaker, in the Taranaki, part of which is in the mighty Wanganui electorate, we this week announced the LNG import facility to ensure that we have critical risks protected in this country, Madam Speaker. And let's simplify it, because one of the things that Labour do when they scaremonger is they don't tell New Zealand what's actually going on. It's pretty simple. Having the LNG facility, listen up, having the LNG facility means lower energy costs for New Zealanders. I tell you what isn't scaremongering, Madam Speaker, it's telling New Zealanders what would occur if the opposition ever returned to the Treasury benches. And the first thing they'd do is bring in a capital gains tax, Madam Speaker. Now, I'm not sure if it would be Barbara Edmonds as the Minister of Finance that would do it, or it would be Chloe Swarbrick, Madam Speaker, along with an inheritance tax. Just imagine that. The Greens holding the Treasury purse, along with what's left of Te Pāti Māori, trying to work out what a justice system actually means. Madam Speaker, so let's talk about positive things this government is actually doing to fix the mess that lot left when they left the Treasury benches a couple of years ago. One of which is the focus the Prime Minister spoke about in the Prime Minister's statement on the tourism growth roadmap. Another great thing for the Taranaki Wanganui region, with the Regional Events Promotion Fund this week announcing it will support the Winterfest in Taranaki and New Zealand's first Festival of Design to be held for the first time in the wonderful Wanganui electorate. 16,000 people will come to Wanganui and Manawatu. Restaurants and cafes will thrive. Accommodation and hotels will be full. Local businesses will see more customers. That is what economic growth is, Madam Speaker.
Tim Costley.
Madam Speaker, we are focused on fixing the basics and building the future. And while we do that, the members on the other side are scrambling. And I've never seen them look so nervous as when inquiry into the use of public money during the COVID pandemic was announced. They won't front the COVID inquiry, and now they're worried about what this one might show happen to public money. And there's Megan Woods yelling out, and they're all worried about some new import for liquefied natural gas, which will save consumers $50 a year. And who was the Minister of Energy in the last government? And what happened to importing natural gas and to gas exploration during that time? What happened to power prices? $800 spot prices. And every single person in the Otaki electorate has experienced the impact of that, whereas we are focused on making life more affordable. And let me tell you what that looks like, fixing the basics and building the future where I come from Foxton all the way down through Whitby, all through the new Kapiti electorate as well. The average mortgage, we hear the numbers, it's almost $11,000 a year cheaper, but what it looks like on the ground is the woman I spoke to last week who had just refixed their mortgage, $180 cheaper per week. $180 cheaper, and she told me that was going to pay for one of their children's dance lessons. They were going to pay a little bit more off the capital to get it down so future interest would be cheaper. And then there's a bit of flex, whether that was, fish and chips on a Friday night on the beautiful beaches of Kapiti, whatever it might be. It gave the family options. That's what it means when we fix the basics. It gives people options. I spoke to a contractor in January who just bought a new digger. Last year, I met 3 farmers who have bought new tractors, all of those because of our investment boost policy. It's fixing the basics, it's making life cheaper for them, opening up new options for their companies, but it's also building the future, because for the contractor, they could go and get new jobs that they didn't previously have the technology to do. It builds their income, it secures up jobs. What about education? Fixing the basics by getting kids learning the structured approach to literacy and to numeracy. And let me just give you one. We hear the stats like, instead of 36%, it went to 58% last year of new entrants at the reading level. Or at the other end of primary school, kids were going up 2 years in just 12 weeks. But what it looks like is when you meet those parents, you see the families, you see the kids that are actually engaged, that enjoy reading, and the trajectory it puts them on. Or I think of the schools like Otaki School. I got to contact their principal last year, Matua Roru, and tell them that their school property funding this year was increasing by 50%. I got to talk about what the difference that meant for the classrooms that were leaky. Not just Otaki School, but Te Horo School and Horowhenua College and Discovery School, or the schools that are getting new learning support coordinators this year. They've been crying out for that for years. Paraparaumu School, Stephen Caldwell must be over the moon with what this government has done for that school. Or Bex and the team at Kapiti School, Pawatahanui School, Plumerton, Raumati Beach, Postgate, Discovery. I could name so many. But it also comes down to the little things. A good local MP fighting for people at Tautoko School to get the new school crossing when the council said no. It's those kind of things that actually build the future, that get kids to school safely and get them learning the basics. And there's so much more we could talk about when we think about what we are fixing in terms of the basics, building the future. There's 38,000 less victims last year of violent crime. It's a big number, but when we break it down to 484 families in Kapiti that didn't suffer that crime, that didn't have to go on suffering as they try to negotiate and navigate the justice system to find justice and to find answers. That's the difference it makes on the ground. And I could talk about the new breast cancer clinic in Waikanai. I met a woman last week who said she used to have to climb up into this old, cold, cramped bus and now can go into a nice, warm space not on the side of the road, and what a difference that meant for her. I think about events like the Fault Line, which will be running in Wellington in April, run by Benji and the team out of Kapiti, that got funding from our major events boost fund. And that's that has a meaningful difference to people on the Kapiti coast. And I could talk about transport. We're literally building the future with O2NL, the new expressway that Susan and I fought so hard for, from Otaki to Levin, the new trains, the electric trains that are going to connect in Otaki and Levin and Shannon and Palmerston North, not just 4 times north a day and 4 times south, 8 trains a day, and on weekends. It is literally building the future. So there is a lot to be proud of over the last 2 years and a lot to be excited about as we move into this year. We are a party focused on fixing the basics and building the future.
I call for Nushi Walters.
Madam Speaker, we're seeing a concerning shift in our foreign policy, but Madam Speaker, if you read the Prime Minister's statement, you wouldn't know it. And that's a concern in itself. The final line of the Prime Minister's statement on the Foreign Affairs section says this. It says, "The government is restoring New Zealand's standing as a constructive supporter of the rules-based order." That is simply not true. In many ways, this government are behaving in a way that contradicts the world-based order. This is a government who have failed to join South Africa's legal challenge at the ICJ, despite joining it in the Ukraine-Russia case. Suddenly, the rules-based order no longer matters. This is a government who has failed to recognise Palestine. This is a government where the Foreign Minister has been publicly mulling leaving the World Health Organisation. It's a government who in one breath say they stand up for human rights, say in one breath that they stand up for human rights, and in the next they abstain on a vote on the Golan Heights, which is completely out of step with our position. It's completely against the rule of law and completely against the way in which our Defence Force have been contributing to the region since 1954. It is a significant shift, and one we should be concerned about. This is a Prime Minister who says he's concerned with the rule of law, but took several weeks to consider joining Trump's Board of Peace. This is a government who, when faced by mass human rights violations in Iran, has not spoken strongly enough to condemn those violations, has not asked for an independent investigation led by the UN in response. We are seeing a shift in policy. We have gone from solidarity to silence, and from silence to strangeness. It's remarkable when New Zealand takes the podium at the United Nations these days, no one has any idea what we might say. Is that better for our ethics? No. But I would argue, Madam Speaker, that it's certainly not good for our security. We are becoming a nation that is squeezable, so that foreign forces might believe that if they put enough pressure on New Zealand may bend their way. Being squeezable is not consistent with our moral standpoint, and it is certainly not something that will keep us safe in a changing world. Now, in this world, we often talk about the left and right, but what the centre has protected for decades is our foreign policy position. But under this government, we are shifting. Make no mistake. And apparently the government is attempting to shift under the cover of darkness by not being clear about it in the Prime Minister's statement. So what does this hold for us going into the future? We either drift into irrelevance because we no longer call out human rights abuses, or we're simply seen as an acolyte, squeezable, depending on who can put the most pressure on us. This year we have a chance to change the government, to bring back a government that we've seen for decades throughout New Zealand's history that stands for clear, principled, pragmatic foreign policy, but also foreign policy that is predictable on the basis of our values, that demonstrates that we are not squeezable. Now, this is a government, Madam Speaker, that is not only failing us internationally, it is failing us here at home, as we're seeing a generation of young New Zealanders leave to find jobs overseas, as we're seeing the Westies that I speak to unable to get doctor's appointments, unable to afford the fees that are $70 and upwards for many of them. We're seeing a government who have gotten rid of our smoke-free generation, and when I protested with doctors in Auckland early in the term, they called this a betrayal. This is a betrayal, and this is a government of broken promises, and come November, we will be changing this government along with the people of New Zealand.
Madam Speaker. Lamoga Lydia Sassini.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a real pleasure to be able to stand up and respond to the Prime Minister's statement. Madam Speaker, I just want to acknowledge very quickly, and I did forget to say talofa lava, a number of our community leaders were out on the front lawn just a couple of hours ago, and the reason why I want to acknowledge them was because these people from my local community of Mangere have come all the way down on a bus to put their petition in, and it was wonderful to be with them today, and I do want to acknowledge those members who took the time to say kia ora talofa. Madam Speaker, the economy and the cost of living is getting worse for many people across Aotearoa. Why? Because this Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, is out of touch. So, Madam Speaker, the reason why I want to say that I've heard contributions since the Prime Minister gave his contribution, and even today he made statements, and I don't know if he's ever walked the streets in Mangere, Auckland. And the reason why I say that, Madam Speaker, is because things are getting worse for New Zealanders. Record numbers are leaving Aotearoa in thousands, and we are losing many of our families, our ainga, who just cannot survive. They're on Struggle Street daily, not weekly, not monthly, daily. One of the things that Labor will do when it gets into government 7th of November is we are going to ease the cost of living. Our policy is jobs, health, homes, and real action on cost of living. So, Madam Speaker, in my contribution, I wanted to highlight what it's like in Mangere, and it's been like that for quite some time, actually, since this government has stepped in. We cannot afford in Aotearoa another 3 years of the National Party. Why? People in Mangere, I have never seen this in all the years that I've lived in Mangere. Madam Speaker, 18 months ago, probably just a bit less than 18 months, we have fire. We have women, Māori and Pacific, living and sleeping in laundromats that are open 24 hours. Our fire are actually living in bus shelters. Many of the services have reached out, including MST, to help these fire. They just cannot afford the cost of living. They cannot afford housing. They are receiving partial benefits, but food has become very, very expensive. So I want to acknowledge the social agencies in Mangere, in South Auckland. I've never seen this in my life. To go past a bus shelter and see fire living in that with a shopping trolley, that is the reality for some of our fire, some of our elderly people living in bus shelters, sleeping in laundromats. So I really appreciate, Madam Speaker, that many of our members have highlighted the macroeconomics, the reasons why many of our Kiwis are facing cost of living. Things like bread, milk, just the basic necessities are so expensive. So my job as a Member of Parliament for Mangere community, many of our young people are struggling. Many of our families, we have the highest youth population in South Auckland, in the country. We have a very diverse community. We have proud people, and some of those people, Madam Speaker, they were out on the lawn today, this afternoon, because of the petition that they brought to Parliament, but they feel so strongly about the issue, they gave up their weekly allowance to get on that bus. And so it's my job here, Madam Speaker. I have the opportunity, I have the privilege of raising these issues to tell that government the reality of people living in South Auckland. And I'm a very proud member of my community, Madam Speaker. I do appreciate that some of our social agencies have really stepped away from their normal role and are actually fronting up after hours to help the fire that have chosen to live in those bus shelters. And that's a really sad thing. I've never seen that in all the decades that I've lived in Mangere. So that government are making choices that are affecting, they are out of touch, and they need to front up to the communities that put them over there. So on the 7th of November, we have a choice to make.
Brian Hamilton.
That this debate be now adjourned.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote has been called for, please, Clerk.
New Zealand National.
49 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
Toru tekau mā whā e whakahē ana.
Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
15 votes opposed.
ACT New Zealand.
Favour.
New Zealand First.
Votes in favour.
Te Pāti Māori.
All opposed.
Taku Te Whereas. Maria Mino Kapakingi.
The ayes are 68, the noes are 53. The question is agreed. This debate is adjourned and is set down for resumption next sitting day. I call on government orders of the day, numbers 1 to 3.
Employment Relations Amendment Bill, Committee Stage. Anzac Day Amendment Bill, Committee Stage. Public Service Amendment Bill, Committee Stage.
I declare the House in committee for consideration of those bills.
Members, the House is in committee on the Employment Relations Amendment Bill, the Anzac Day Amendment Bill and the Public Service Amendment Bill. We come first to the Employment Relations Amendment Bill and we begin with Part 1, which is the debate